Today we are in Vermont and we are checking out the smallest towns. And Vermont's a little bit different than some of the other places I've gone to. When you go and look up information about like what's the smallest town in Vermont, you get a couple different things. There's something like 240 incorporated towns and cities, and so that's the list I went off of. There's a few unincorporated places. There are some things called gores, which is interesting to kind of learn about, which hardly any people live in, but they're little land areas. So I decided, let's go with the smallest incorporated towns. And when I started looking at that, I found that the 4 smallest towns were all in Essex County. And then Essex County is also the smallest in terms of population county in Vermont, a little over 5,000 people. So normally when I do a video about the smallest towns in the state, I do 10, but I thought since Essex County seems to have a lot of them, let's just go check out the smallest ones here. They're all not too far from each other, and I'm in the first one. This is Victory, and it's kind of unusual because there's not much here. It's different because when you type in Victory, like if you go to Google Maps, it has a big area. So I'm guessing the definitions of like a town limit up here are a little bit different. And so there's obviously a few dozen people that live in this town. They're probably just spread out all around the area. We'll see if we can find anything. I think there's supposed to be a cemetery or 2, but it's going to be difficult finding much more than that. When you go to where it says Victory on the map, there really isn't anything here, but there is a little notice and it talks about the town hall. And then there is one older building here, kind of in the main street area. So I guess we'll wander around Victory within the town limits and see if we can find anything. So I learned that in Vermont, back in the day, towns were often chartered long before any settlers moved into a particular area. This was very common in the mid to late 18th century. Then once there were enough residents in a town to formally organize the government, no further action was necessary to incorporate it. This practice led to inconsistencies in the dates of the incorporations for towns. So Victory was chartered in 1781, but no one really lived here until about 1820. You can see we found a cool old cemetery back here by the school. It was probably named Victory after the Revolutionary War victory because it was named just after that. It's not really documented as such, but likely that's what it was named for. In the late 1800s was the time that Victory was its biggest. It was busy as a logging and agricultural hub. It had multiple post offices and schools, sawmills, a starch factory, and a granite quarry. Potatoes were grown here for starch and alcohol production. And then timber production declined, and attempts to convert the land to strictly agriculture failed. It was one of the last towns in Vermont to be connected to the electric grid, which didn't happen until 1963. As you look at the population, it was obviously really small, like I said, in the early days, and then grew until the 1890s where it peaked. And then, like I said, by 1940, most people had left, and the population has been really small ever since. You can see kind of up and down, and at its current population of 70. Really beautiful. You can see some of these areas I'm showing you with the drone here. We're going to explore around and see what else we can find. If there's anything more than just where building and cemetery here are at the beginning. Fred Mould, who worked to preserve Victory Bog. In his round of daily life, he gave himself, cared about the least of his brethren, and took the time to even feed the birds. Where he met a stranger, there he left a friend. Fred sounds like a good guy. Interesting memorial out here. As I started heading north through the limits of Victory, I did start finding some buildings and some houses, some really nice houses there. And, you know, ones that looked older is still a little bit confusing as to where is the town hall and where would they have their town government set up. But at least I did start seeing a few more structures along the road. And then where I saw a little grouping of houses here, I found a little sign. Town Hall. It's almost like they're trying to hide it from the public. So let's go check it out. Victory Town Hall. That's the smallest town in Vermont, Victory. So hopefully the other towns won't be as hard to figure out. For a guy from Kansas up here in the Northeast, that was an interesting little trip around Victory. Obviously you can see it's really beautiful here, and really enjoyed exploring it, and finally found the town hall and a few places where the people live here in Victory. Guessing what that means is this is the town limits. Victory to the right, Granby to the left. Right next to Victory here is Granby. Granby, yes. And there's more here. There's an actual little downtown, I guess you could call it, with a couple buildings. There's houses around and mailboxes. Yeah, but obviously it's like Victory, it's a bigger area, so there's like cemeteries and houses all spread out. But nice to see a little bit here in the downtown area of Granby. The second smallest town in Vermont here, Granby, was chartered in 1761. And like I mentioned before, it doesn't mean there were people here, but that's when it was chartered. It was named in honor of John Manners, the Marquis of Granby, a celebrated British Army officer. He was a hero of the 7 Years' War, which is known in America as the French and Indian War. Logging was a major industry just like in Victory, which makes sense. It was known for its abundant white pine. There was a little community called Stevens Mills here, which was a railroad stopping point that appeared on maps in the early 20th century. Even though it's very small, it's known for its scenic beauty and wildlife, attracting hunters and outdoor enthusiasts, and was connected to the electric grid just before Victory in 1963. And when you look at that population, same as Victory, peaked in 1890, 361, then dropped off significantly. Been pretty steady, down to 81 today. Short drive over to the county seat of Essex County, Guildhall, and we are on the border with New Hampshire and Vermont. This is the Connecticut River and the bridge that connects the the two states here at Guildhall. It's the smallest county seat in Vermont, just a couple hundred people. The same kind of thing, the area is kind of spread out, so in terms of where all the people live, I think it is kind of spread out. But it appears to me that there's a little bit of a downtown. Let's go check it out. This is actually the 15th smallest town in Vermont, but because it's the county seat of Essex County, which is the least populated county, I wanted to show you what that looks like. So according to the sign in the town, it's the only town in the world so named, and it is derived from a meeting house on the square here called the Guildhall. It has a D, but I'm guessing that D is silent, as the town sign said. It was chartered in 1761. Original settlers were from Massachusetts, and they named towns on the opposite sides of the river there in New Hampshire and Vermont for their hometown. So Lancaster is the town on the other side of the river in New Hampshire. Just like the first two towns we saw, it's heavily wooded, and lumbering was once a major portion of the local economy. The whole area here, this historic district on the corner of the populated area here by the river, it was listed on the National Register of Historic Places in the 1980s. Population was pretty steady through the 1800s, around 500 to 550 people. Just like those other towns we already saw, after 1890, population decreased. It's about half of what it used to be. Obviously, being the county seat has helped it maintain some of its population. Kind of like our other couple small towns, not a lot to see in Brunswick. There is a town hall and an old school, which is cool. And then just kind of right there where the school is, there's a road right here that leads back to Brunswick Springs, which the sign talks about as sacred to the Wiseguy Abenaki people and needs to be treated with respect. No trespassing without permission, so we're not going to go down there, although that road does kind of go down and around. And yeah, so there's probably not a whole lot to see here. There's a few houses in the Main Street area. Other than that, it's a beautiful drive up along the coast, New Hampshire on your right, through some hills and mountains, and really pretty, but really small. Downtown Brunswick. Like I mentioned previously, towns in Vermont like this cover a much wider area, but this is just the, I guess, governmental offices area on the main street here. But it's the fourth smallest town in Vermont with a population of 88. It was chartered in 1761. First settlers came in 1780. It was named after Prince Karl Ferdinand of Brunswick-Lunenburg. The governor at the time here named it as a way to curry favor with the British royal family. That was a common practice for colonial governors of the 18th century. It was noted for having more white pine timber than any other town in Essex County at the time of its charter. In the 19th century, it became a popular resort destination because of 6 mineral springs that were found here. Population peaked in 1870 at 221, and while it wasn't as big as some of the other towns that we saw that went up to 300-400 people, it's also only lost about 2/3 of its population compared to having lost most of its population in those other small towns. But it's still been very, very small ever since 1910, dropped down to 45 at one point and then back over 100 until it's settling in at 88 today. final town, Lemington, a little bit different. We are on the covered bridge, or in the covered bridge, and on the covered bridge. And this takes us over to New Hampshire. And pretty cool way to end here. Lemington is like a lot of these other towns. They have a couple buildings like a town hall, an old school. And so pretty interesting that there's some history.
Lemington was chartered in 1762, then settled in the 1780s. The name Lemington is likely a variation of the English place Remington from Yorkshire, which comes from the Old English words meaning boundary stream or farmstead on the edge of a stream. So the first permanent settler of this town was named Mills de Forest. He moved here from Connecticut about 1781. He was able to build the first framed house in town in 1790. He had the first sawmill in 1795 and the first grist mill in 1810. He was the first town clerk and held the office of representative for several terms. Not a lot of history online about Lemington, so feel free to fill me in the comment section if you can. Population peaked in the late 1890s like all these other towns and has lost more than half of that, obviously, but 2020 was the first time it was below 100 since the year 1800, 220 years ago.
These towns obviously were a little different than some of the other towns I go to, but often I go to the 10 smallest towns in a state, and they're different for different reasons, and these are different for different reasons. So I guess I should have expected that. But I really liked them. It was fun kind of learning about the history. Vermont, how they make a town in terms of incorporated town is a little bit different. And that's cool that it's different. Each state has kind of their own way of doing things. And there was some really interesting history, some great old buildings. And so, I was glad that I went down some back roads of Vermont and then took this river road that is really beautiful as well. So hopefully you enjoyed the little trip through Vermont. Maybe we'll come back someday and finish out the other 6 that we didn't visit in terms of the 10 smallest. Hey, thanks for making it all the way to the end of that video. And since you're here, let me tell you a little bit more about the extras on the channel. One of the first things you can do is become a member. There are 3 levels of support. There's supporter, producer, and executive producer levels. All 3 have different levels of fun incentives and perks. If you haven't done so, please check out travelwiththewiseguy.com. There are lots of extras on there to explore. One of them is merchandise. We have Travel with the Wise Guy coffee mugs, Death Go Round t-shirts, hoodies, hats, and all sorts of fun things to show your support of this channel. Also on the website is a custom Google map. I've dropped pins in every place I've visited and linked the episode to each location. This seems to be a very popular feature for many of you. Also, sign up for my free newsletter that goes out about once a month. There are all sorts of links and tidbits on this page, old videos, podcasts, and just about everything I can think of I throw on the website. Get all that information on travelwiththewiseguy.com. I have better cell phone reception here than at home in Wichita. Thanks, T-Mobile. I'm in New Hampshire now. Back to Vermont.